a legally married person, being a male or a female, go through?
Okay, so before we, go to the concept of what is abuse, let us talk for half a second about what it is to be in a domestic relationship. What all can come within the scope or the ambit of a domestic relationship? Is it only a husband? Could it be a fiance? Could it be a live-in relationship? Could it be relatives of husband? Could it be friends that you're staying with? So under law, we have a very limited concept when it comes to criminal matters, that it has to be a marriage and it has to be your husband or his relatives with whom you share a common household. So far as Domestic Violence Act is concerned, it could be anybody with whom you have a marriage-like relationship. And here, like you mentioned, Sheena, physical abuse is not the only thing that is covered. We cover a vast variety, like we had also mentioned in the flyer. Something like a financial abuse, where somebody is not, suppose your male counterpart is not giving you even the monthly expenses for running a household, or is tormenting you and harassing you and verbally abusing you every time you put on lipstick or every time you pick up a new purse or whatever. And there are these things that all of us go through, in smaller measure or greater measure, because the society isn't as developed to understand that this is wrong. Even when, when so many of our friends or acquaintances come and tell their parents that I'm having a bad time in my relationship, my marriage. And the question that everybody asks is he beating you? Is he coming back drunk? Is he cheating on you? Exactly. If the answer is no, what's your problem? The problem is much greater because you have brought up your girls to be independent. You've brought up your girls to have a mind of their own, to have dignity for themselves. And now suddenly the institution of marriage is enslaving the way the society looks at it. But somehow our law is very forward looking, just that we are not aware about it. So the Domestic Violence Act 2005 is a great step forward in this direction. And what it covers, let me give you the exact word from the statute. It says abuse, domestic abuse can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be verbal, it can be financial. So many aspects are covered in this. And it includes not only a married woman, it includes a woman in any circumstance which is marriage-like. You only have to go over the threshold to prove that your relationship with person X was akin to a marriage. It was similar to a marriage.
Even if it's a legal partnership, right?
I'm sorry?
Even if it's a legal partnership, like we have the concept of live-in relationship also these days.
Correct.
So it applies to that also.
That's exactly what I was hinting at. So in a live-in relationship, if you are sharing the same household, and if you're dependent on each other on some things, like one person to earn, the other person to cook, or both of them to earn and both of them to cook. But if you're sharing some responsibilities together and it's a shared household, then it can come within the fold of domestic violence. And now what are the reliefs? Suppose you know your rights, that you cannot be physically or verbally or emotionally tormented by a person, your husband or your partner, etc. But what do you get? How can you stop it once you know that something like that is happening? So under the IPC, that's the Indian Penal Code, you have a section called 498A, which is called cruelty. And this can be applied to only by a wife. This is not allowed by any person outside a marriage. So a wife under 498A can seek jail time to her husband. She can file an FIR and she can get her husband or the relatives or whoever is abusing her in any manner which comes within the fold of cruelty. And that can be a punishable offense. Similarly, prohibition of dowry. We know that dowry today is not asked in the typical ways of, give me so much gold, etc. There are various ways in which husbands and their families can ask for dowry. And they might pride themselves at the time of marriage to say, we are not going to ask for dowry, but they will verbally abuse the girl throughout the time that she is in that household, that you didn't get any money, your father hasn't paid any money, and therefore I have to earn. And if these things happen, then Dowry Prevention Act comes to your benefit, and that can again be a criminal offense. But as we see many times, wives or girls in live-in relationships don't want it to end. They don't want their partner to go to jail. They just want to improve it. They want to be in a more dignified situation with the same person and carry on the institution. So for that, the Domestic Violence Act really comes to aid. And what that act says is, you can get remedies like protective orders. say you have a shared household, you have a bungalow that you live with your husband and his parents and his sister. So tomorrow you can go to a court under Domestic Violence Act and say that I should not be thrown out of this shared household and my possession of the house should not be disturbed. And the court will grant you this relief even without hearing the other side. So on the first day, if you file it on Monday, by Tuesday or Wednesday, you can get this relief. And final reliefs you should get within a period of 60 days. That's the law, 60 days. And that's a very short time period to, kind of get relief in Indian courts. Similarly, you can ask for decrees like the husband's salary, 10%, 20% of it should be paid directly in my account for household expenses. And even the courts are known to give such orders. There are orders like, suppose you have physical threat from somebody. You can get orders that he should not come within so much distance, 500 meters of my house or of my office or my son's school, or he should not communicate with me. If you feel that he torments you with some abusive language or some memories from the past, you can say he should not communicate to me. Absolutely. So such orders, which are very creative, very innovative, it's all a part of our law.
All right. So, okay. So we have spoken about that there are various remedies various laws available to protect our women in terms of monetary threat, in terms of life threat, in terms of abusive environment. So there's one more thing. A lot of times I've seen women discussing that they cannot file a complaint, or they cannot leave their husband, or they cannot take any action just because they fear for the custody of their child. What if they leave the abusive house? They're getting abused at the moment and they want to leave the house at that time to save their life or to stop the brutality to happen, but they don't do it just because they are scared of losing their child's custody. What is the right way to solve that problem? So is there any law that if a mother abandons her kid just to save her life, a husband has this extra the husband gets the custody of the child, or the husband can contest the custody of the kid in that scenario? What is it?
Right. So this is also a question that comes up so many times in the first consultations when, family issues are there with women or with men. But the one thing that is very settled by law is that custody is generally given to the wife. That's the norm, the thumb rule. Not that it cannot be changed, especially of minor children. If they are, say, in the age group of 0 to 10, then most definitely it would be given to the wife. If it is a girl child, then again, till her teenage is completed, again, the custody is with the wife. Unless the husband can show that the wife has mental problems, if she's schizophrenic, or if she is economically weak, or if she tortures the child, or has bipolar, or any other instability, or she has caused grievous injury to the child because of her carelessness in the past. If things like that can be shown, then perhaps the court might give the custody to the husband.
If the mother is, not competent enough, in a simple word.
Correct. Not competent in a couple of things. One is mentally stable. Second is economically stable. And third is whether she is very careless in her actions in the past. Suppose a child fell from the swing and broke his leg. Then that can be an incident that the husband will quote to the court, that she couldn't take care, therefore the child should be with me. And then what the wife can say is, are you going to be a sit-at-home dad? Or do you have any workplace support that you can really raise a small child? So usually the courts are bent towards or inclined towards giving the custody of a child to a woman, the wife. And I don't see how this should come in the way of women fighting for their rights. Rather, because the courts are so inclined towards giving the custody to them, it would be a better decision, because staying with an abusive partner means that there will be repercussions on children. When you fight loudly in the household, it has psychological impact on the children. When you have had a fight, you can't make the best decisions. And when you know that the stronger partner is always the man, he can end up making some bad decisions for the child as to which school to go to, whether or not to take up some activities. So always trying to get the custody of the child to yourself, and then ensuring maintenance. Another problem that ladies generally face is, we will get our children with us. We know that we'll get the custody. but who will maintain? My husband is very rich. For my sake, I do not want the child to be deprived of a good education or a luxurious childhood. So that's never the case. You can very easily get monetary reliefs. Now, there are monetary reliefs under various different laws. 123 of the Criminal Procedure Code grants maintenance to wife and child. Similarly, under the Domestic Violence Act, over and above what you get under the CRPC. So if you're given, say, 50,000 a month by CRPC relief, under the DV Act, you can ask for more, saying that what my husband earns in a month is maybe 2 lakhs. And both his children are going to be in my custody. A has education needs, B has health issues, and we need XYZ amount. I did not make a career of my own because I was busy making the home for 4 of us. And therefore, my career has suffered and I cannot support my children financially. So the husband is understood to be the provider for the household, which would change if the wife is also working. If the wife is working and earning more than the husband, then surely maintenance from the husband becomes an issue. The courts consider that factor as well.
Okay.
Also, I see, China, I'm sorry, but I should take this up. There are a lot of men joining this conversation, and it is such an amazing thing to see so many
Yes.
of the other gender join us, and that shows hope for us. And somebody I saw has asked a question, what about the men? Are there any orders or any laws in favor of men? And I think this also deserves to be covered, like you rightly mentioned in your flyer as well.
Because
Sometimes,
it's just not a women-centric topic. We are covering both sides of it. So
right,
we will
right.
talk about men also. And I'm happy there are a lot of men joining us because yes, it's so the law protects us also, but it also gives some people the chance to abuse men also. So let's talk about that now. I'm sure a lot of people will be
Correct.
happy.
So
Yes.
I have seen this actually much more often than women coming up, probably because socially and psychologically, women are brought up to not express their problems of a household outside. So not many women approach a lawyer. Men are more easy to approach a lawyer and talk about what's happening at home. So we see a lot of clients coming in and telling us that my wife has filed a false complaint against me. Her family is influential and they are unnecessarily dragging me into a situation. And because the laws are so women centric, we are likely to get caught in. And sometimes it does happen that, you know, a man will bear the brunt or the fire of a wrong or a false case against him. But there are certain precautions that men can take. Now, both these acts that I mentioned, the IPC as well as the Domestic Violence Act, they do not cover any abuse done to a man. Because socially, we've seen that the fairer sex is generally the weaker in the paradigm of marriage. And however much we want to believe that there's equality, and though we see that in some rare occasions that even women can be bullies in the relationship, it's not something that the law recognizes yet. Maybe it should, and in some years to come it will. But today what it does help the men with is protective steps that they can take. One is, once you know that your wife is going to do something or file a false case, it never happens out of the blue. There are always indications. There are some threads that will be meted out by her family or by her. And that's your first chance to report this to all the authorities concerned. Not in the manner of a criminal complaint, but only to safeguard your side. You must most importantly mention it to the women's cell in the police station, which is not about filing an FIR, but about counseling both the parties and making sure any grievances can be dealt with without a criminal procedure being set in. So if you have in detail told them that these are the threats that are being meted out to me, despite no action of this kind being taken on my part, then that will help you in getting an FIR quashed if an FIR comes to be filed by your wife with bad intentions, or get anticipatory bail immediately and not suffer any consequences or harassment of action taken by her. Similarly, a style of going offensive on this could be that you charge the wife and her family of malicious prosecution. You file defamation suits against them, both civil, there's a civil remedy as well as a criminal remedy, depending on how harsh or how serious the situation is.
Okay.
So this is about what the men can do. I'd also like to touch upon what is the procedure. Now, women have kind of heard in very brief, we can go in much detail. Actually, 15,
Yeah.
20 minutes doesn't even let us touch the topic. To discuss in detail, we'll need at least an hour. But I think we don't have that. So let me jump into what is the procedure for getting these rights addressed. It's easy to say, let's go file an FIR. But in practical reality, a lot of us know it doesn't happen that smoothly or that seamlessly. Police generally, when it comes to marital cases, are not very happy to file an FIR at the first instance. They want you to
Yes.
settle outside, and they know that a wife will file it, and after a couple of months, she'll say, no, 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 I want to go back to my husband, and I'm not interested in really pursuing this criminal complaint forward. So the police tries to act as a counselor, going beyond their usual role and try to settle things. They'll give a warning to the husband, they'll call both parties, they'll talk to them. Now, what happens if your husband is influential and they have kind of relations or connections with the police and they're not letting your FIR be registered? What you do in those circumstances is you write a letter to the police inspector of the nearest. Okay, another question before we come to this is where to file the
Yeah,
FIR.
we have, okay, Pratnya, sorry to disturb you. We have a couple of questions in between right now. I think after the question that you're going to answer to, let's answer these 2-3 questions so that we can continue further, because a lot of people are joining in and asking a lot of questions. So first question is by Sivida. She's asking, are the same rights extended to those in a live-in relationship? So I'm hoping that she's asking for the rights under the IPC Act and the DV case.
So we covered this briefly initially, but let me repeat it. Under the IPC, it will not apply to people who are in a live-in relationship. It will apply only to a wife. Under Domestic Violence Act, which is more broader in terms of what all reliefs you can get, something like blocking his account, getting monthly expenses from the husband, getting a house, I mean your shared household, a part of the house in the possession of it for your daily usage, getting protective orders like not to communicate with me, etc. All of these are possible even in a live-in relationship.
Okay. So that's the answer. So Vasu is asking, is live-in legal? I think in India it is. It got legal 2 years back. It is.
There is no statute about this, but there have been a few judgments, and the Delhi High Court has taken an amazing stand at this, and Supreme Court has also accepted it.
Okay. Okay, so Kunal is asking, I went through an article a couple of days back where Supreme Court has declined to award any maintenance to wife who was working with sufficient salary. Valid point. So yes, a lot of times we've seen that a woman who's earning cannot demand for monthly maintenance or any alimony. Is that true?
I'm not sorry, I don't understand this question.
Question is that
so he said if the wife has enough salary, then he can decline to pay maintenance.
Maintenance, yes.
Is that
there's an article a couple of days back where Supreme Court has declined a wife's request for maintenance.
So it's not such a correct. So it's not such a straitjacket answer or a straitjacket formula for this. There are various factors that need to be looked at. Suppose a wife has a salary of 20,000. Suppose the husband has a monthly income from his business of 10 lakhs. And suppose the wife has a standard of living in her father's home as well as the husband's home, which requires her to spend about 1 lakh a month. Then surely 20,000 she will not be able to claim from the husband, but the 80,000 ahead of 20,000 she can claim from the husband. So there are a lot of circumstances. I'll give you another, just the opposite hypothetical situation. Suppose the husband earns 30,000 a month and the wife earns 2 lakhs a month. Then the wife surely cannot claim anything from the husband.
Okay.
So this is one of the factors. There are many other factors that will have to be looked at, like what is your lifestyle? Like how much of your career did you compromise to make sure that the house was having enough time and the home was, being looked after and the kids were brought up well. If your career has suffered and because of that your salary isn't X amount but it is lesser, then surely that is something that has to be compensated from your husband. Suppose you're earning well, but your expenses because of your children and their medical or educational issues are much higher. then your husband, if he's capable, he will have to help out, and the court recognizes this.
All right. So yes. So we can say there's no straight answer to this question. It completely depends on the situation that is there, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we have another question. Whom do you contact first in case of abusive cases? So I feel we'll get back to this question at the end of it, where we talk about the emergency number, the contact details, or the first contact person who should be in case you're getting physically abused, if there's a life-threatening situation ahead of you, if you think you're getting abused but you're not sure how to go about it. So we'll cover that question at the end of it. There's another question. If I help one of my friend in her battle against domestic abuse, is there any harm that can be caused to me? How can I protect myself in that regard? Okay, now something we should talk about. Suppose I have a friend who's helping me through my battle. So could there be anything that can be done to her to harm her in any ways? How
Right.
can she protect herself while she's trying to help me out?
So, this happens a lot of times, not only people who are helping somebody legally or financially, but even people who are witnesses in cases. So, suppose I am your neighbor. I've heard you scream and shout every day when your husband comes drunk and hits you. And then tomorrow I want to be a witness in front of the police. They can surely threaten me. They can surely find other ways of stopping me from being the witness. And in such cases, even if there's no criminal complaint, but if I'm helping you in any manner, in your battle against domestic abuse, I also have a remedy in under the Domestic Violence Act 2005, which says that protective orders from court can be sought against the abusers to friends or other people who have provided assistance to the victim.
Okay.
So law has been very forward thinking, and even these people have been, because you see a lot of times, many of us are fortunate to have parents who are very understanding, but many of us are not.
Yes.
And in those cases, it is their friends or other people that they know from workplace or elsewhere who will come out and try and help them, who may be of the same age group, etc., and have many other vulnerable spots. So it's to cover those kind of situations that this provision in the law is there.
Okay. So, okay, nice. So we have another question. How does the wife prove to have been emotionally tortured?
Correct.
So basically,
now,
how So we don't have. So for physical abuse, we obviously have the bruises or we have the medical reports and everything. But a lot of times, because the husbands, the in-laws, or the wives, they know that if you touch a person, the person can go to the police, can take action. But sometimes they are so clever, they don't touch you, but they emotionally abuse you, they manipulate you, they verbally abuse you, but you do not have you just don't have the idea to record those things. You don't have any evidence. How do you prove such things? You just can't go and tell them, oh, this guy emotionally abused me, he just abuses me, and people just say, oh, what's wrong in that? This is India, guys. They earn, they abuse, and you're a wife, adjust with it. But do we have to adjust with it?
Absolutely not. Adjustment is something that is required in every relationship, not only marriage, in a friendship, in a mother-daughter relationship, in every relationship. But adjustment, which means that one person has to be enslaved to the other, and something that crosses the legal line, I think surely not. So how the law helps us in this regard is, we've already defined what emotional abuse is in the statute itself. So they say what all covers or comes within the four corners of the word emotional abuse. And they include things like if you are threatened, if I have to just, read out. It says insults, ridicule, humiliation, name calling, insults or ridicule, especially with regard to not having a child or a male child, and repeated threats to cause physical pain to any person in whom the aggrieved person is interested. So, sometimes they may not even say anything to you, but they'll say something like, I'll go and say something to your father who has a ailing heart. or I will tell him what kind of a girl you tied up to me, and look what I have to go through, how much nakre I have to take care of. And you may not really want that. You may not want your parents to find out, or you don't want to let down your parents. There's this Indian psychology where the girls feel if they fail in their marriage, they're letting their family or their parents down.
Yeah, it's
so even that is covered.
Phrase, no, कि एक बार आपकी शादी हो गई है, it's be it Bollywood or anything, it's that phrase, आपकी शादी हो गई, अब तो आपकी अर्थी को कहाँ से वापस आना चाहिए. In between, whatever goes down, it goes down with you. Adjust with it.
Correct. So not only your own name calling, like suppose a lot of people in India are very concerned about fair skin. A lot of people are concerned about a male child. And if you are being verbally abused or ridiculed based on something like this, and another common phenomenon that we see, that mother-in-laws, the minute there's a bride who's married your son and just entered the family, immediately will start name calling. अच्छा तू तो ये करती है, तेरी माँ ने तो सिखाया नहीं है, तुम्हें तो खाना बनाना ही नहीं आता है, तुम्हें तो ये अच्छे से रखना ही नहीं आता है, etc, etc, etc. A couple of times till you can bear it and till you're learning and both of you are helping each other run the household, it's all right. But if it goes beyond a point that it starts affecting you somewhere, then surely that will come within the word emotional abuse. And to prove it, now the question that Neha asked was brilliant, because though we know that this is an abuse, how do you go around to prove it? And it's much more difficult, like you also mentioned. Physically you can prove with medical records. How do you prove emotional abuse? So here, if the girl is smart enough and aware enough, she can start, whenever there's something happens like this, she must tell other people who can act as witnesses later. Two, she must record whatever she can. Record either in terms of written record, where she writes an email to her husband or her mother-in-law. Maybe if they don't use emails, you just write to your own friend saying this happened and I don't know what to do. And all of these written records can come to use later. Say after 6 months you go and you want to file a case for emotional abuse. The court will realize that 6 months prior you couldn't have started conspiring this or planning this. If you've written something 6 months prior, it must be genuine and true. That value is always given. You must record whatever they say to you. Either video record is brilliant. If you can't do that, audio record it. There are spy pens which people use in such cases.
Or even WhatsApp chat, I think. Even that is valid, right? If
WhatsApp chat also works, of course, that also works. Any written or audio visual record which can prove, and tomorrow say you have no record available, then what do? Then you go to the court, you put down your case in a plaint and you say XYZ has happened, and then you call your neighbors or whoever else, the household maid or whoever else you believe is willing to tell the truth. And once you put them on the stand, the court will just simply ask them whether you really heard this, yes or no. And if they give their testimony in your favor, then you will have a decree of the court.
Okay. So we have another valid question here. Many times we see that father-in-law and mother-in-law are also dragged in domestic violence case or 498A case. What remedy is available for them? So yes, a lot of time mother-in-laws, father-in-laws, sister-in-laws, and that is the case with a guy. And in the case of a girl, a lot of times her mother, her father, brother, sister, or even a friend is also dragged in these cases. So what are the remedies for such situations?
Now, there are two things that have to be looked at. One is whether a specific role has been assigned to them in the FIR. So if the FIR says that my mother-in-law used to also emotionally abuse me, or she used to beat me up, or my father-in-law used to lock me up, if there's a specific role assigned to them, then surely it cannot be called as dragged in, unless the role is wrongly assigned to them. In which case, what we discussed earlier in terms of fake case, the same precautions will have to be taken, quashing, anticipatory bail, etc. But if their names are taken without giving them a specific role as to what they have done to torture you, or just because they're staying in that household, they're torturing you, then you can go for quashing the criminal FIR so far as you are concerned. That is the mother-in-law and the father-in-law, or anybody unconnected with this couple. And there the court will see whether there is any role, whether you stay in the same household, whether there is common property, whether, depending on what the allegations are really. So depending on the allegations, depending on your age, depending on your ability to do something notorious, and your closeness, physical closeness with the couple. If you're staying in the same household, usually the courts will not quash the complaint against you. But if you are staying, say, in city X and the husband and wife are staying in city Y, and still your name is being taken, then the courts will definitely quash it so far as the mother-in-law and father-in-law are concerned.
Okay, I have one more point on the same topic. So a lot of times it happens that the mother-in-law, father-in-law, sister-in-law, or any relative of the husband or of the let's say husband, they're not physically present. Like they don't live under the same roof, but they are equally available or guiding via digital media. Let's say over the phone, over Skype, or all these platforms that are available. So they have this escape route that we were just not physically present, so how could we abuse a person emotionally, mentally, or physically? So what is the remedy in that case? How can we prove
Right,
that
right.
even if the person was not there, the person was the mastermind behind everything? If this person was the hand, then that person was the mind.
Now, so far as your criminal case under 498A is concerned, or dowry protection law is concerned, there you definitely need to have a specific role that is assigned. If you, like you mentioned, if somebody is the mastermind and very cleverly they're not staying there, but they're constantly on the phone with the husband, telling him how to talk to your wife, what to say to her, what to do, what not to do, when to keep
Exactly.
silent, not to talk to her, even not speaking to the wife for hours on end can be torturous and can be termed as cruelty. And that has been so done in many cases that, you're entering a new household where you are in the minority. Now, if everybody in the house is ignoring you, talking amongst themselves, cooking amongst themselves, eating amongst themselves, and you're led to be a loner, like a person, who's a burden on the
Denial
family and
of
who's not required
basic
there.
human decency, let's say.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
So that is also brought within the fold of cruelty. And but again, in those cases, unless there's a very specific role assigned to you as to how you could be the mastermind despite not being in the same household, then you may succeed in your case. But so far as DV Act, the Domestic Violence Act is concerned, which is not the criminal penalty, where you don't send anybody to jail, but you just get protective orders. Here you can surely allege even against those persons who are not physically present.
Okay.
So, the level is different. In criminal case, because you're sending somebody to jail, the level is much higher. In a domestic violence
Yes.
case under the Act, DV Act 2005, the standard of proof is slightly lesser.
Okay. All right.
Does it make
So
sense
we
or
have
should I
discussed
elaborate?
it does. So the gist is that you have to, if you're going for a criminal case, if you're going for an FIR, be sure that you specify each and everybody's role. Don't write a vague FIR that I was beaten up or there was emotional abuse and these people were there. No, be specific is the keyword here, right? Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
One more thing to add here is,
Okay. So
whatever
we have,
offenses,
yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, whatever offenses that you are alleging against the perpetrators of violence, say your husband or whoever, you must read the ingredients of those offenses and make sure that your story in the FIR has all the ingredients. If any ingredient is missing, then that FIR, even if true and genuine, can be immediately quashed by the court. And police sometimes, if they are hand in gloves with the husband or his family, will not tell you this. So it is very important to sit down with a lawyer while framing your FIR. Otherwise, very important sections which could otherwise be added will not be added. And it would be made into a non-cognizable case on your behalf. Non-cognizable case has no meaning because it's a bailable offense. Immediately you pay some amount and you get bail. And there is no threat to the husband. Rather, he will be all the more enraged that you had the nerve to file a criminal case against me. Now see what's in store for you. So it's important to consult a lawyer right at the first stage. And if you want to do it on your own, then you consult some other groups who are willing to, do this pro bono and who may guide you in this regard.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the next question. There have been various reports to show an increase in number of domestic abuse cases in this pandemic. What could be the reason for this, and how will law interfere in such situations? So reason, as far as I understand, because it's pandemic and people are stuck in a situation. They are, initially you're very open about it. You're adjusting, you're adapting, but after a point of time, it gets mundane. So the mental frustration, the inability to perform your daily lifestyle could be the reason that adds up to the frustration, because you're overloaded with stress, with work and everything else. So that could be the catalyst in increasing the number of abuses that are happening during this time. Again, what are the remedies or the legal help? I think the legal help is again the same, which is there, which is available in the regular cases, in the non-pandemic cases, right? Or is there anything, or is there any special helpline or any special course of action that has been designed to help such people by the government of India, by any NGO or any organization that you're aware of, Pradnya?
So,
Is
you
there
know,
anything
several NGOs,
emergency?
when they started out in March and April, and the reports started coming out, because they said abuse is not so much about the need for something, but it's about power play. And when the man can go outside of his home and he gets a place to release his aggression or show his power, it still gets balanced out. But when you're inside a closed circle constantly, and you are sitting with your abuser day in and day out, obviously the abuse cases will come up. That is one. Second reason is also that because you're not afraid that the wife will go out with a battered face and people will see, and I will be called out as an abuser, because everybody is indoors, nobody's going out. So your wife will never be seen. The neighbor will never know that she got abused, or her work people will never know that she got abused. So that's another reason why this increases. Now,
Plus,
what
you're
can be done? You're
constantly
very
face
right.
to face with your victim. You're constantly in front of your abuser. In normal, regular life, a person has to go out by for one thing or the
Right.
other. But in this time, you're just right in front of the abuser or the victim. So it also triggers them. I just feel that somewhere it's the
Correct.
mental thing also, not just the
Correct.
what she said or what he did. It's also the mental trigger that is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And what you said about the remedies is very correct. All the remedies that are available in the regular course are also available here. But a lot of NGOs and think tanks have come forward and they've said that, we are going to allow our own helpline. So there is a Damini helpline in Maharashtra, and I think everywhere else it's called differently, but they have a helpline in all the states. And this is a toll-free number which you can call. And there's a women officer, police officer. It's a police wing itself, and women police officer will answer to your call. And if you are in immediate danger, they'll even come and help you. If you're not in immediate danger, they'll tell you the steps that you can take. There are also shelter homes that are available for you to stay temporarily if your house is an abusive place and you cannot stand it anymore. So all these orders can be obtained under the DV Act again, under the protective orders.
Okay. All right. So we have another question. We are coming up with a lot of questions. I don't know if we'll be able to cover all of them, but let's just see. So there's another one. I think this is very important. Can a minor sister, I would say brother also here. So can a minor sister-in-law or brother-in-law can also be assigned as accused under DV Act? Minor? 18?
Surely. If it is a minor below 18, then questions of juvenile justice come about, because there's a separate act to deal with minors who are accused of offenses. It's not that they are let free, but there's a different court and an entirely different system of criminal justice so far as minors are concerned, because you don't want one mistake of their life to define their entire future, and you still hope, because they're so young, they can be modeled into better people and not violent people. So you have something called the Juvenile Justice Act, which has a separate procedure for this.
Okay.
They can be made accused, but they will be treated slightly differently from the main accused.
Okay. So I think, Anmol, that pretty much answers your question. And I think it was a very important question. I mean, I didn't even think about that a minor or a major could be an issue in this. So,
but again, Tina, one will have to imagine a person who is 12 or 13 years old, how does he become a part of the abuse brigade? And you will have to justify something which feels true to the listener. Otherwise, the judge is going to quash it. So unless you can say how this 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old became a part of the abuser gang, and that role is very nicely specified, the FIR may not stand.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we have one more question here by Ritika. If a girl wants to her home and she's refused, what is it? What should she? So I think what she means to ask is that if a girl, a married woman, is refused to go to her parents' place, what should be the course of action in that case? So a lot of times I've seen women who say that their husband, they have this habit of keeping them in a closet, that you should not be talking to your friends, or you should not be speaking to your parents, or go to your parents' place, or meet your friends, or have any friends, or even speak to their relatives also. So that, if she's going through something, or if she's being abused, none of it goes out. So let's keep the friends and the relatives aside. What if a girl is being denied the basic right to go to her parents' place? What should be the course of action?
So, this is very interesting, and you're very right. It does happen. Let us see under which of the four abuses it can be covered under the DV Act. So, let me just read these definitions briefly before I answer your question.
Okay.
Okay, insults.
Okay, meanwhile, I'll just answer this question.
Very,
It's a sorry. So somebody's asked about a reiteration on emotional mental abuse, and how to prove that it's an abuse. So the liberal lawyer, we have already discussed this topic in detail in this live session. I would suggest that you go through the recording, but still, if you want details on the same, you can DM me. I'll certainly forward you some links, and detailed discussion on this particular topic, because we've already discussed this in detail. So I don't think we can take up this again, because we have other topics also to cover right now. I'm really sorry, but I will definitely get back to you in private message on that. Okay, Pratya,
can I jump in here now about the earlier question that you asked? It was a brilliant question about if you're not permitted to go home, or wherever else that you want to, such restrictions that are made on you, will they come within the realm of emotional abuse? Now, since it's already defined and it doesn't say, does it use the word includes? So whenever there's an inclusive definition, directly the definition does not say that if you're stopped from going to your parental home or to your friend's house or to some party or whatever, it will be called emotional abuse. But the definition itself is inclusive and not exclusive, which means that anything else which meets the same threshold can also be called an emotional abuse. So I think looking at the spirit of the act and the statute, certainly if you are restrained from going somewhere which is, so, also you will have to see what exactly you're being restrained from. In a relationship, which is a marriage, both husband and wife will put some restraints on each other. Yes. Some could be considered as reasonable, some could be considered as unreasonable. But if you're not allowed to visit your own parents, then that surely is a very unreasonable restraint, which could definitely come with an emotional abuse. It could also come with an physical abuse if you're being locked inside and you're not allowed to go outside. We see this a lot in the case of NRI marriages. It's a whole separate segment of family law for us when we are learning it, when we are professionally using it as well. Women who get married to men abroad, looking at the very good salaries and an independent lifestyle away from mother-in-law, father-in-law, people are generally, thrilled that it looks like a great thing to do. But what you don't realize is these men there's a possibility that they are not grounded. And there are so many instances where people beat you up, take possession of the passports, lock you inside the houses, and all of that directly comes within physical abuse.
Yes. Okay, so the best and the simple thing to say is that being denied of any basic rights, say speaking to your parents or visiting your parents, we could club this under under emotional abuse, as well as mental abuse and physical abuse in case of NRI marriages, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have another question here. If a Oh, 1 second, please. Okay. So if a girl gets good life at father and girl is earning just for own, will in arranged marriage, if guy is earning well and giving a very rent, okay, giving a very basic life with rented home and stopping her to buy basic item. Okay, so I think what the person wants to ask is that, let's say if a person comes from a well-off background, having lived a comfortable life at her parents' place, um, so after getting married to this guy, the person is objecting to her basic lifestyle from which she has come to come down to this one. The girl is earning, but having lived in a pre-owned property to living in a rented house, and being denied of basic minimum lifestyle that she was used to, what
Right.
does it fall under? Which category does it fall under? Is it
There's
financial
something called
abuse,
economic
emotional
abuse.
abuse? Yes, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something called Economic Abuse under the Domestic Violence Act, and this is a perfect case that falls under it. If you want to have the autonomy to decide what to do with your salary, and if it is again not an unreasonable demand. Now, many women I see, they come up with this theory that I earn as much as you earn, and you're my husband. You earn a lakh month per month, I earn a lakh per month. My salary is for spending and splurging on whatever I want to, my hobbies. Your salary is for the household. Now, that's something that the law does not really sit in well with. If you are earning lesser, you need some more expenses for the household for some necessary things, surely the court will come to your aid. If you have a higher lifestyle and the husband earns much more, again the court will come to your aid. But if you are trying to put the husband in a corner, and you're trying to just ensure that he's drained of everything that he has monetarily, then the courts will not support this kind of plunder. So we have to understand that the limit of reasonableness also has to be seen.
Okay. Yeah. So okay, in this, okay, let's say let's take an example that a girl is from a rich family. Let's just take it in terms of financial difference. So a girl is from a rich family. She marries into a middle class family. Now that let's say what she's used to buying something like her monthly expenses was, let's say, 10,000 a month. Now at her husband's place, her expenses have been set at capped at 5,000 a month. But as per her previous lifestyle, that is not enough for her. So what is it that she can do in such case? What is the I think it's pretty much starts with was she aware that she's marrying into this financial situation? I think that is the first question to ask here. And if not, if it's if both the families are at the same financial level, but still the wife is denied of her basic lifestyle, which was agreed upon before the marriage, but then again it's denied because you should get money from your parents, or you should be earning for your lifestyle. Why should we sustain it, and why should we go for it? So what can she do in that case? Again, should she go for domestic violence? She doesn't want to divorce her husband. She doesn't want to take any doesn't want to
So,
file FIR,
it
or
all depends, right? It all depends on what are the resources that are available with the husband in the first place. If the husband is somebody who doesn't earn as much, now, socially, family income is something that matters. But legally, family income, the wife cannot really claim a share of. It's her husband's income that she can legally claim a share of. So if the husband is earning, say, only 20,000 a month, and he's giving you 5,000 for whatever expenses that you need, the family may have a big bungalow and, a lot of money coming in from the business, but that doesn't come to the husband. Then it's slightly difficult to make the case. But we can always, proving that something was agreed prior and you misrepresented yourself to earn X amount, but in reality, you're earning a much lesser amount. All of this will become slightly difficult to prove. But if there are witnesses who are willing to give the testimony, then again, surely a case can be made out.
okay. There's one more case. So one anonymous question that I've received this morning. So let's say, since the section 498 only covers the in-laws and the blood relative, it does not cover any person who's not a relative of the in-laws. Say a marriage was fixed by a friend. So the friend is also a co-conspirator in abusing a girl. So that person is, you know, that person goes free just because the person is not blood relative. How can we take action against that person? Because that person involved in misleading marriage, in let's say forgetting the word. So basically that person, hid the fact at the time of marriage he or she was the co-conspirator into providing information which was not true. And after the
Right.
marriage, when the abuse is happening, the person is also constantly present physically and digitally in abusing the person, but goes free because he's or she is not a blood relative. What are the remedies or course of action that can be taken against such person?
Right. Now, generally the circumstance that you mentioned, it looks like it could fall within criminal breach of trust. There's an offense under IPC 406 and 409 which talks about criminal breach of trust. Then there's 420 cheating, where you have to prove the ingredients, of course. But if you have a specific role assigned to that person, that person was mediating in the marriage, and
Yes.
with an intention from day one that you should get married and some money or dowry should come and something that she will gain out of it or you will lose out of it, either ways. If that intention, mens rea can be there. Mens rea is the criminal intention or the criminal mind of somebody. So if we
Okay.
can prove that, or at least make allegations with regards to that specifically, then even outsiders other than the blood relatives can be brought in.
Okay, so it's not that they go free.
No.
Good. All right. Okay, so I think we are pretty much done with all the questions. Just a lot of appreciations, coming in with the initiative and everything. So, is there anything else that you want to focus on this matter?
Right.
Because we are already
Just
1 hour
one
into
thing
it,
about.
and I am so happy we're getting such good response. And I did not imagine that a lot of people would come up with these many questions. It's just overwhelming to see this happening, and that to Insta live and everything. Oh my god, it's amazing. Yes. So anything
I
else that you
think
want to add
all
to
your
it?
followers love you.
I love them all.
So, so yeah, just a couple of things before we close. One is about filing the FIR. Where can you file the FIR? This is a common question that I get from many clients. So
Yes,
maybe
I
your
have.
husband
I'm sorry
stay.
to cut you in between. I have one question on this. So a lot of time I've seen women and I've seen people telling these women that you cannot file an FIR, especially in a criminal matter, if you're not living at your in-laws' place. So to file an FIR, either you go back to your in-laws' place and you do something crazy and then you go for a FIR or something like that. Can a woman, a domestically abused, physically abused, a woman who has been abused with criminal intention, file FIR from any other place but her in-laws? Would that be valid,
Right.
or would that be taken in as
It's
serious?
possible. It's very much possible. You can always file an FIR from your parental house at the nearest police station, but it will not be registered as a proper FIR. It will be registered as a zero FIR. And then that gets transferred to the place where the respondents, that is, accused persons, that is your husband or parents-in-law or whoever, lives. If you feel that it is going to be an harassment for you to actually go to that town and then file an FIR, and it is not either monetarily or physically viable for you. So many times, these women have young kids, like really infant kids, and they say we cannot travel by ourselves, we need help for carrying the child, and there's so much follow-up required when you file a criminal complaint to ensure that the FIR gets registered, and then some investigation goes on and there is no underhand dealing with the other side. So for that you will need constantly back and forth with the police station. That is generally possible if you are in the same vicinity. So for those cases, you can always file a zero FIR in the place that you